Hello and welcome to Fellowship in Essential Oils. I'm Elizabeth Ashley and we're missing Adam again. He's been gone too long now, but I am very pleased that one of my most favourite people in the world is joining me today. Laurie Glenn, how are you, darling?
I'm doing quite well, Liz. How are you?
I'm really well, thanks, Laurie. Tell people a little bit about yourselves and then we'll talk about vanilla.
Okay. Well, I work for the American Botanical Council as the Herb Clip Managing Editor and have done that for over 20 years. My journey with essential oils began back in the mid 90s, where I was fortunate enough to have David Crow as my first teacher. And when he was, still a practitioner before he became Floricopia. And so feel very blessed that he was my first introduction to essential oils, and then have just continued a journey with them through different teachers and different just experiences with them. And I'm here today because of them.
I'm fascinated to know when you've got a horde of oils behind you, what was it about vanilla that made you want to talk about this one?
It's the stories that go around vanilla. I mean, vanilla itself, it has a wonderful story in and of itself. But then there's, different mythology stories around vanilla. And that's what intrigued me about it.
I think of all the essential oils, well, and all of the flavors and fragrances, vanilla needs a press officer. I just don't understand how anybody can use the word vanilla and make it mean bland and boring. It is such a sensuous flavor and scent, isn't it? I absolutely love it. So I'm intrigued to know about the stories. Tell me some vanilla stories.
All right. Well, I think first we need to set the stage for vanilla. It's native to the Gulf Coast of Mexico
Mhm.
and, the Mayan areas, Guatemala, Belize. Most of the stories come from the Totonacs, who lived in the area that is now Veracruz. Um, so they um, they have an interesting history in and of themselves. One of their capitals cities was named Pampatla, and that means it's the shining moon area,
Mhm.
but it also was known as the city that perfumed the world because of vanilla. And they also, the Totonacs, that region is famous for their dancers. The Baloderas, and I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, um, of Pampatla. And what they do is they climb this huge pole and then they dance off of this pole. They've got one man in the center and four on the sides, and they just do this intricate swirling. And I was fortunate enough when I was visiting Teotihuacan in 2012, we just were walking through the parking lot and there was this huge pole with dancers on top. And so I was able to experience that, not knowing what it was or the history of it. The history is that there was a drought. And so the gods said, we need to see you do a ritual, perform a ritual to bring fertility to the land. And so young men went into the forest, got a large tree, and then did this intricate dance around it. And one of the things that I had wanted to get when I was in Mexico was vanilla, and they were selling vanilla right from Veracruz. So that was a very special moment for me. Um, but to even step further back, um, in the Mesoamerican culture, there was a thing that Jane Hill in the early 1990s termed the flower worlds. And she looked at songs from different portions of Mesoamerica. And I'd like to read one of begin the song in pleasure, singer, enjoy. Give pleasure to all, even to life giver. Delight, for life giver adorns us. All the flower bracelets, your flowers, are dancing. Our songs are strewn in this jewel house, this golden house. The flower tree grows and shakes. Already it scatters. The quetzal bird breathes honey. The golden flamingo breathes honey. You have transformed into a flower tree. You have emerged. You bend and scatter. You have appeared before the goddess's face as multicolored flowers. Live here on earth. Blossom. As you move and shake, flowers fall. My flowers are eternal. My songs are forever. I raise them, I, the singer. I scatter them, I spill them. The flowers become gold. They are carried inside the golden place. Flowers of raven, flowers you scatter. You let them fall in the house of flowers. Ah, yes, I am happy. I have gathered jewels, wide plumes of the quetzal. I contemplate the faces of jades. They are the princes. I gaze on the faces of eagles and jaguars, and behold the faces of jades and jewels. We will pass away. Enjoy. Do we really live on earth? Not forever on earth, only a brief time here. Even jades fracture, even gold ruptures, even quetzal plumes tear. Not forever on earth, only a brief time here. And the idea of the flower world, and obviously every culture is going to have a different expression of the flower world. But if you have ever seen the movie Coco, the idea is, you have these marigolds that will bring you into the flower world, and into another realm. And so the flower world is actually another realm. It's the idea of, it's a place where often the great and the good go after death. Or it's a place where it's just another realm across a veil where the fae live, or the gods and goddesses live. So that's a very simplistic version of it. The anthropologists have obviously written books and obviously tons of articles on the flower world, and there's different aspects of it, but that's a basic understanding of it. So that gives us an introduction to what the Totonacs would have said was, what gives us a foundation. So the Totonacs, their word for the orchid was Xanat, which means hidden flower. And then the Aztecs, who would later conquer the Totonacs and demand that they pay their taxes in vanilla orchid bean, or in the vanilla beans, called it Tlitxlo which means black flower. And again, I'm probably butchering the Nawa, but and then the Mayans called it Zizbek. So one of the creation stories involves the goddess Xanat, who was the daughter of the fertility goddess. And she fell in love with a mortal man. And of course, that love was forbidden. So, in one version of the story, they were both put to death. And in the commingling of their blood, the orchid vine was formed, and showed that their pleasure and joy and love for each other. And then in another version of the story, Jeannot freely chose to become an orchid bloom in order to be with her lover, and to provide joy and pleasure to him. The goddess Totonac means she who nourishes. She's the goddess of earth and maize, and she's like our Demeter or Ceres. She had a cult following. There were temples that were devoted to her. So in another story that involved the vanilla orchid, there was a king named Tenitzli, and he was the third of his dynasty, and he had a daughter of surpassing beauty, and her name was Zakopantsitsa, which means morning star. And morning star was so beautiful that her father decided to dedicate her to the goddess of fertility. And so she went to the temple and was to devote her life to the goddess. And during the time when she would go and pick up the offerings for the goddess, there was a young man named Katan Ushka, which means young deer. And he saw her and he fell in love. And so he'd watch her from afar, and he was just so in love with her. And eventually, he was, consumed by desire and stole her away. And, the stories on the internet says that, it was a mutual thing, that they both, she fell in love with him as well. So they headed up a mountain, and they ran into this very fierce monster who breathed fire on them and caused them to return down the mountain into the road where the priests of the goddess were waiting for them, and immediately slit both their throats. And then they were taken back to the temple, laid on the altar, and basically were sacrificed. Then months later, they noticed that there was this shrub blooming up, and it grew tall and very quickly. And then after the shrub had grown, a vine started forming around the shrub and would sinuously grow up the shrub and intricately, as if it were a woman's arms enfolding this shrub. And then, of course, the flower bloomed, the orchid flower bloomed, and they thought, oh, well, this is obviously the two lovers who have come together. And so what fascinates me is the idea that, the in all the stories, it's the idea of the star-crossed lovers who come together. And so what would lead the storytellers to develop these stories? And I think, the obvious fact of you've got this tree of one species and this vine of another who entwines, around the tree. And so different species, but they're, a god and a mortal, joining together. Or, and I'm sure we'll get into this later, but the vanilla is a hermaphroditic plant. So both the, male sexual organs, the female sexual organs are there, but they are separated by this veil. And it requires, a nectarer, to either a hummingbird or a bee or now mostly done by humans, to cause that joining together in order the beans to form. And so I can see where seeing those two aspects, these mythologies would arise around those. And then I got to thinking, I've been asking the question to myself, well, all right, so how would, based on the story, then how would the people and the shamans, or the medicine people, use this plant? And we know it was used by perfume. As a perfume, it was used in incense, it was used in medicine. The Totonacs did not use it, or rarely used it, as a flavoring. That didn't happen until the Aztecs came in. And the same with the Mayans. They used it in a ritual offering with copal. So I can see it being used to bring lovers together, especially like if you're a young woman wishing for a particular mate to wear a vanilla perfume, or to piercing that veil, that flower realm, between the human world and the divine world, and finding a way to connect with the beloved on the other realm, the sacred.
I think what's interesting is there is only one bee, isn't there, that can pollinate the vanilla plant, the Melipo plant bee. So I got this vision of all these other insects coming, but just nothing happens, you know. So it's almost like this star-crossed lover thing of, well, she has so many relationships, but it's just got to be this one perfect one with this particular bee. And as you say, I think when you're looking at doctrine of signatures, for example, these climbing vines that wrap themselves round, they will often have aphrodisiac properties to them, the way that they entwine themselves around things. You can see how people would look at them and go, well, there's this amazing perfume, although there's not the amazing perfume to vanilla until it ferments. Did you know that?
Yes, I've read several accounts where it says that it either says that the flower has no scent, or it has a slight scent, but it has no reminiscence to the actual bean. And of course, the bean, when it's on the flower, when it's formed, it doesn't have a scent either. It has to go through this extensive process of being handpicked, and you have to spend it. The pod has to spend 9 months on the flower, and then when it starts to form, the end of the pod becomes yellow.
Yeah.
That's when they handpick everything. And then, of course, it goes through, and I'm sure you know more than I do about this extensive process of drying and then fermenting, and then stopping the fermentation, and deciding what has the best flavor. And
I don't know much about. I do know is that the yellow pod smells like bitter almonds, and it's only when it starts to go brown at the end, and then they pick it and it ferments, and then it takes on this fragrance that we all know. And as you say, it's very sedative and languorous and aphrodisiac and comforting. I think it's fascinating. I wonder if it's like a westernized thing that it makes you think of baking, because like Victoria sponge and what have you in your nan's kitchen. Wonder if other cultures would have that same association, because it's like the classic cake, isn't it? Vanilla. But yeah, beautiful. So my favorite story about it, I hadn't heard any of those, so thank you for sharing those. That's just so lovely. My favorite story is about how it came to uh, be in other countries apart from Mexico, and about the pollination. Do you know about the little boy who discovered the pollination?
yes, but if
So
you want to tell the story, I'm happy to hear you.
what I love about this story is, as a mom of three children, two of them being boys. No boy can ever be outside without flicking a stick around. Just think it a lovely story that a boy with a stick sorted this out. So, little boy uh, in reunion, um, where vanilla vines grew, but no pollination happened because the bee was not present. He's looking at this beautiful, beautiful flower. It's like an orchid, and and knowing what he does about flowers, goes, I wonder if I push this stamen into this sepal, the male and the female bits together. If I push them together, can I cross pollinate them? He's only 12, this little boy. And can you imagine his delight when weeks later he goes back and there is a pod growing? So this little boy, 12-year-old boy, if I remember rightly, his surname was Albin. And I think it's called the Albin method now. And because in Reunion they know how to fertilize now, they have outproduced any other nation. And so now all the good stuff comes from Reunion thanks to this little boy and his stick. I love that.
Yeah, it's fascinating that they took the vanilla orchid to Reunion and to other tropical areas. And obviously it wasn't pollinated until the little boy came along. And so it had been, decades. It had been blooming, but nothing had happened. And this in 1841, and almost 200 years later, we're still using the same method that little boy came up with. And it's no wonder, vanilla is the second most expensive spice, saffron being the most expensive. And when you see the procedure that it has to go through, in fact, I wrote it down. It takes 4 to 5 years after planting for vanilla to produce its first blossoms. And then after the pods are harvested, they have to be meticulously cured over a series of months, undergoing an enzymatic process that develops the highly coveted aromatic vanillin molecule. For vanilla cutting, it takes 18 months before it first flowers. The small yellow-green orchid blossoms will bloom for only a few hours, and during that few hours, it must be pollinated. And then the green beans will form after a few weeks, and they must remain on the vine for the 9 months. And it's only after the beans are harvested that they go through the curing and drying process. And those processes vary, but the enzymatic process in the live beans must be halted to prevent fermentation. This is accomplished through heating in ovens or blanching in hot water. The beans are then placed in the sun each morning for weeks and sometimes months before they are then placed into wooden boxes and allowed to sweat. So, you can imagine being wrapped up in a blanket. After being out in the sun, they're wrapped in a blanket and, they're sweating out all their moisture. And then there's anywhere between 200 to 250 natural flavor components that develop. And then the entire process from pollination to when they're ready to ship takes about a year. So
It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a fascinating vanilla, even beyond the myth, has a fascinating story.
I just think it's enchanting, full stop. You're talking about the film Coco. It made me think also of is it Joanne Harris's book Chocolat? When she writes about, she has a French lady opens a chocolate shop, and she knows all of the ancient wisdom from the Mayas and stuff, and she's enchants. She's a chocolate witch, really. And it seems to be that always the vanilla beans that she enchants people with. It's lovely. Yeah.
It
What
makes
do you
sense.
use it for? Go on.
I'm sorry, what?
I was going to ask you, what do you use it for?
Um, So interestingly enough, when obviously perfume,
Hmm.
um, and when I was taking a perfume course, one of the things our teacher had us do was, go beyond that it's, the vanilla scent, that it's, how it smells, and really develop a profile for it. Um, and so this is before I did any research on vanilla, before, I knew anything about it. What I wrote was Gaia wrapping one in a warm hug that is both comforting and sensual sexual. Deep, dark, vine-like, crosses boundaries, or maybe it's boundless. Relaxing, exotic, sedative, voluptuous. The dark mother with pendulous breasts. And you know the Dylan Thomas poem where he talks about the force through which the green fuse drives the flower.
Hmm.
So what I wrote was a way to reintegrate the force that has been disconnected from the flower.
I love that.
So that is, the more ethereal, looking at it. Practically speaking, of course, it's been used and been tested. This is getting more into looking at it from my working with American Botanical Council, but the idea it's been used medicinally for helping people with nausea during chemotherapy or early pregnancy and morning sickness. It's can be used to help people with stress and anxiety during different types of tests, like whether you're going through an MRI or going to the dentist. Um, or it's been studied in preemies. And one of the recent studies that I just read was that it was used to try and help them to be able to take in milk. And it was shown to be effective. And it's Mindy Green has said that it's the smell of vanilla is very close to what a little infant would associate with mother's milk.
Isn't that fascinating? I didn't
Mhm.
know that. So there is also some research that almost kind of contradicts that in a way, which is fascinating. That if you have sort of sweet cravings or you're trying to suppress appetite, then inhaling vanilla calms the appetite down. So I wonder what it is that makes them. But yeah, you would want to suckle, wouldn't you? Definitely. Isn't that lovely? Wonder about who thought of doing that.
I don't know. It is fascinating. You mentioned the contradictions. It's when I was reading about vanilla and how it was used, it was like it's used for being, for for relaxation and for stress, but it's also used for virility and for invigoration. So it's almost like an
Mhm.
adaptogen for whatever we need.
Yeah, it's kind of like tantric, isn't it? That the kind of well, in some ways, that's part of getting in the mood, isn't it? That you have to be relaxed enough to want to do it.
Right.
But
Hmm.
yeah, yeah, and it is so comforting, isn't it? I think you could say that word over and over and still it just fits perfectly, doesn't it? Comfort. And you're thinking about like the comforting smell of the candle, but also comfort eating. It's just all round, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you were to talk about energy centers, what energy centers do you think that it touches?
Probably, obviously, second chakra and the sexual center. I would associate it with air because it actually, unlike a lot of vines who root into their host shrub and draw their nutrients from the shrub, the vine actually sends out roots into the air and it draws its nutrients from the air.
Ah, are they called epiphytes, maybe? How interesting. I didn't know that. Um, and yeah, so I would agree about the sort of sacral chakra, but I think also, given that we keep saying comforting, I go root chakra as well. Interesting that there's a different kind of roots and not in the earth. That's fascinating to me. What about planetary rulership? Any thoughts?
Well, in reading, it's often associated with Venus, as in Aphrodite. So I would also associate it with Venus, the planet.
Venus and Pluto, I would say, because that's more the sexual side, but also this idea that you're going into a dark place. It's a very dark kind of oil. Incidentally, we haven't said, so it's not, so strictly speaking, it's not an essential oil, right? That's right, is it? Oleoresin?
It's an oleoresin. There is a CO2, which is very different than the oleoresin and absolute.
Oh,
So the CO2 is actually, it's creamy looking, where the oleoresin and absolute are very dark. And where the oleoresin has a more animalistic and tobacco-like sense to it, the CO2 is more of the true vanilla scent. So depending on how you're going to be using it, you would want to look at whether you'd want to use the oleoresin or but in perfumes, it's known to kind of tone down the blend, but also it again, this contradictory thing, it helps to bring forth, like the flower or but they do say that you have to be very careful with the amount because vanilla tends to bloom itself after a blend has been put together, and then that's all you would smell. So you'd want to,
yeah, it comes thickly then. Yeah, yeah.
mhm. So
What
you'd
were you
want to
saying?
use of course, in a perfume, you could use cacao and, create a gourmand perfume. Or the fir balsam absolute is also a wonderful combination with vanilla and kind of it's that marriage of, I would say, star-crossed lovers.
Did you say fir balsam?
I'm sorry?
Did you say fir balsam?
Fir balsam
I can't imagine
absolute.
that at all. That doesn't even sound like it would be nice. I'm fascinated by that now.
It's
Very
a
good.
beautiful smell.
Maximum dilution. Any thoughts?
No idea.
Yeah, I'd just go 3%. I don't think there's a reason to worry about it. There's no sharpness to it. I don't know about the CO2. I've never used it, but that would be interesting to find out. Yeah. So, Adam always says, do you think it's an oil that you need to have?
No, I really don't think you need to have it unless you just happen to be in love with vanilla and want to work on, that idea of, your sexual energy, or work with the idea of the mystical energy of connecting with the beloved. Then I would say yes. But just to have on hand, no, you have other ways to experience vanilla, whether it's getting the vanilla extracts. Again, you want to make sure you're getting a high quality extract because a lot of vanilla is not from the vanilla plant. It's just
Mhm.
synthetic vanillin. So, and that's something we haven't touched on, but a lot of vanilla extracts that you just buy on the grocery shelf are not going to be from the vanilla plant. So that would be I happen to have a friend who goes down to Mexico at least once a year. And so I always say, please buy me vanilla. So my vanilla comes from Mexico. But
How
yeah,
lovely. I love it, I have to say. I always ask for it for Christmas. Buy me an extract for Christmas. Yeah. Very good. So is there anything else that feel you'd like to say about vanilla?
I can't think of anything. What about you? How do you use it, Liz?
So for me, I mainly use it, as you say, in aphrodisiac blends, sedative, relaxing blends, especially for people who cannot relax, are so pent up. Um, Also, I'm definitely going to be using it for babies for breastfeeding. Now you've said that. And one of my kind of pet hates is people talking about breastfeeding because I think that especially, well, not so much breastfeeding, but like getting kids to sleep because they'll say, oh, put some lavender on. Well, babies navigate by smell. So if you put lavender over your smell, then baby's going to be more distressed, not less distressed. But the idea that the vanilla is very close to the smell of mother's milk is fascinating to me. So I think just like to put a drop on your breast pad so that it goes onto your skin, and then you get milk on your breast pad and you put that pad into the cot. I think it would be fascinating to see how effective that would be. I think that would be really useful. And especially, as you say, with little preemies who don't want to suckle, to kind of want to do that. I think that's, I didn't know that. I'm quite in love with that fact. And I think in terms of babies, another fact that always sits with me, did you know that babies don't have their own cortisol response?
No.
So this is really interesting. And I think I really wish that they would teach this to new moms, to every new mom. So unless you have some kind of um, adjustment with your cortisol system. So, for example, people with Asperger's, this doesn't happen to. This is one of the things. But most of us will wake up in the morning and we will peak about the cortisol level will peak around about half an hour after we get up, and that's why usually people want to have a coffee to wake themselves up. But our body naturally does it. So 30 minutes afterwards, and then it trickles down throughout the day to help us deal with stress, full stop. And of course, if we are stressed, then we secrete higher levels and it goes up and down, and we'd hope that we didn't secrete too much of it, because then eventually it cortisol is naturally anti-inflammatory, but if you secrete too much of it has an inflammatory response in the body. But for the most part, we've got this kind of up and then down scenario. But until a baby is 2 years old, they don't have it. They develop it around about or just after the age of 2. Before that, their cortisol mimics their mother's. So this has profound ramifications, I think, for mums who have postnatal depression, because what happens is baby is picking up on mum's stress and screaming, which makes mum worse. So I think any oil that can really calm mum down like this, and of course, I mean, there's so little research, medical research done into vanilla, which is fascinating to me in itself. There's just very little. But I would have thought that you would imagine that this would be one that would improve oxytocin. You know, it's kind of got a bondingness about it, this love kind of thing going on. The relationship with breast milk all says oxytocin to me. So if you've got a molecule that can kind of encourage mum to be relaxed, mum to bond with baby, baby to sleep, mum to sleep, all of those things, I think you would see with vanilla. So I think mum and baby stuff. If a friend of mine had a new baby, I usually make them something with rose in, because that has a profound effect on I think also, now you've said that, I'll be using it for that kind of stuff as well. And of course, it's lovely in body butters and stuff like that. It's just really nice cosmetic, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one of the things I read, was that using it in lotions and body butters, it was good for the emollients of your skin.
Yeah, definitely. And incidentally, there are people who, we talked about it, like the vanillin molecule is what we're searching after, but there are people who are allergic to vanillin molecules. So if you are, then this is not one for you. But for the most part, I think it's a really good one to just do cozy with. And I mean, cozy seems like a naff word, but if you make somebody feel cozy, it's a real present, isn't it? I think
It is. It is.
yeah. Very good. So, Laurie, you don't have books and things to sell, but
No.
I would like you to tell people a little bit about the Botanical Council.
Okay, so the American Botanical Council is a nonprofit. It's been around Oh, I'm going to get this so wrong. I'm going to say 30, 35 years.
Mm.
Mark's going to kill me for that, for not knowing that off the top of my head. Um, and we educate people about the medicinal use of herbs. We have a journal that comes out 4 times a year that's called Herbal Gram. And then what I'm in charge of is called Herb Clip. And what I do is take peer-reviewed articles, and then writers create summaries and critical reviews of those articles. They are edited by a consulting editor. They are also peer-reviewed to make sure that all information is included and is correct, and reflects what we know about the herb or botanical in, in a wider perspective. And then
Yeah,
those
I think
are published twice monthly
yeah, I
online.
think anyone who's interested in studying plant medicine, it's an excellent resource. Yeah, fantastic. I can't thank you enough for being here, but also I want to say on a personal level, I've had a horrible year, and you've been one of the highlights of it. You've been such a good friend to me. Thank you so much for always being there.
Thank you, Liz. You have been a delight in my life as well.
Say bye, Laurie, and we'll see everybody soon.
Bye.
Bye bye.